Hello and welcome to Press Corner here on TVP World with me, Ashim Kumar. Press Corner is our regular Sunday morning review of key events with our colleagues in the media and other experts here in the heart of Europe. On Press Corner, we celebrate the luxury of a free press by listening to diverse opinions and letting our audience reach their own conclusions. Today, I'm delighted to be joined by Agaton Kozinski.
Hello,
He's
nice to see you.
A columnist. Małgorzata Zawadzka, she's a journalist, social anthropologist and a long-time correspondent to the Polish media in the United States. Welcome, Małgorzata.
Welcome.
And Wojciech Łobodzinski, I hope you'll forgive me for mispronouncing his name, a columnist with La Stampa. Welcome, Wojciech.
Thank you for having me.
So we've got a number of topics that I'd like your views on, and we'll obviously be having a look at the press and what the articles are saying, and we'd be delighted to hear your thoughts. We're going to start off with the authorization given to Ukraine to use weapons against Russian military targets in Russia. So basically, what's happened is that Germany has joined the United States in authorizing Ukraine to hit some targets on Russian soil with the long-range weapons they are supplying. The move's aimed at helping protect the city of Kharkiv, which lies close to the Russian border. It's drawn a furious response from Moscow and warnings that it could draw Russia into war with NATO. Now, we have a short video I'd like to share with you, and then we'll get into the conversation.
As NATO foreign ministers met in Prague, Berlin and Washington gave the green light for Kyiv to attack military targets beyond its border inside Russia with Western-provided long-range weapons. It's a significant policy change that comes as depleted Ukrainian troops lose ground in the war. Ukrainian officials had expressed frustration over restrictions on the use of Western weapons, especially as the border region of Kharkiv endures a Russian onslaught that has stretched Kyiv's outgunned and outmanned forces. In Prague, Polish Foreign Minister Radosław Sikorski announced Warsaw's 45th aid package for Kyiv.
Poland has sent 44 packages of assistance to Ukraine. We are now organizing our 45th. And the last few have been around 100 million euros each. We think we've contributed in military assistance alone around 4 billion euros so far. So I hope if others took the cue from us in proportion to their GDP, Ukraine would be on the offensive.
Sikorski said the gathering had established a mechanism for financial support for Ukraine's defences, amounting to $40 billion a year, half of which will come from the US. He also revealed a plan for Ukrainian citizens subject to conscription to be trained by the Polish army. Earlier this week, Poland fleshed out details of its East Shield project, a 10 billion zloty programme to beef up defences along its eastern border with Belarus and Russia. The border has been a flashpoint since migrants started arriving there in 2021. Brussels has accused Moscow and Minsk of trying to destabilise the bloc by pushing thousands of illegal migrants across the EU border. The plans include building fortifications and telecommunication systems in coordination with other Eastern Frontline NATO allies, Finland, Estonia, Latvia and Lithuania. 2 days later, the country witnessed further evidence of the hybrid war, as a Polish soldier was rushed to hospital after being stabbed by a migrant. He was one of 3 guards injured this week. Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk visited the forces patrolling the eastern frontier, announcing a 200-metre wide buffer zone will be introduced along the border with Belarus. The backing in Prague for use of long-range weapons on targets in Russia comes despite repeated attempts by the Kremlin to deter the allies from taking that step, with threats and intimidation. The alliance's General Secretary Jens Stoltenberg stated emphatically, though, that the Kremlin's sabre-rattling will not stop the West from assisting Ukraine in defending itself. Work now begins on finalising preparations for NATO's full summit in July that will be held in Washington, where Russia's war in Ukraine and its hybrid war with the West will be high on the agenda. All right, so there's quite a lot to unpack there, but let's start
with permission being given to Ukraine. And, it's something that that leaders have said. I mean, the UN, NATO, they've all said Ukraine has a right to defend itself, etc., but then has forced Ukraine to have one hand tied behind its back. That's finally changing. Okay, so first of all, Russia has always said if that happens, we'll consider it an attack on Russian soil, and it could trigger a nuclear war. And unsurprisingly, as reported in Foreign Policy, Putin and his spokesperson Dmitry Peskov have reiterated that. How seriously, Agaton, do you take that threat?
Yeah, it's the threat which is above us from the very beginning of this war, because we all know that Russia is equipped with nuclear weapons and they are repeating they will use it. They not exclude it. In Russian military strategy, we are not excluding using nuclear weapons, so we are familiar with the threat, and I don't think it's a threat which we should be afraid of now. We all remember the very beginning of the war when Putin was talking about using the nuclear power for the very first time, and it was China who stopped him. It's impossible to take it off the table, and it was taken off the table, and I think it's still up to date. I don't think China will agree on anything except from conventional warfare.
Again, a hollow threat.
Yeah, it's like all the time. Of course, we all know this rhetoric about escalation ladder, and Putin is stepping up on this escalation ladder. But I think in this time it's empty. And apart from that, if we will still keep thinking in this nuclear threat scenario, we, as the collective West, we should do nothing. We should be afraid of everything, or apart, we should be prepared for everything and be ready to answer properly on that.
Right.
And what is the question? It's we cannot exclude helping Ukraine if we are not interested in helping in that. And I think it's in our common Western interest to protect Ukraine in everything what is possible.
Would you agree with that, Wojciech?
I mean, this lifting of restrictions should have been done, 1 year ago, 2 years ago.
Yeah.
Because I've got a strong déjà vu. I've got a strong déjà vu here, because we've seen also Ukrainian rights towards Belgorod, and of course they used Ukrainian weapons, maybe not missiles, maybe not ATACMS. So threats from Putin, as Agaton said, it's just a repeating of the same song.
Right.
But right now, the question is that missiles are in play, and Russians are also afraid that we've already doing that training when it comes to pilots and F-16s, but now we are going to send them, and they might appear over Ukraine in September. So the picture is changing, but it should have been done long time ago. Yeah.
But it wasn't. And Małgosia, I'd like to bring you in on this one. Now, the US, President Biden, has in stages come to this position. And what he has said is, yes, you can attack military targets inside Russia, but only those close to the border. So there are a couple of questions I'd like your view on, please. The first is, why has it taken Biden so long to get this to this stage? Is it for political reasons or something else?
Well, it's because America is afraid that it will cause a nuclear war. They see themselves as guides over nuclear weapons in the world.
Right.
So and they are afraid that with the precedence of Putin using even the small nuclear weapon somewhere, this will set a precedence and other countries will follow. Right. And we cannot, even if I fully agree as a Polish citizen with what Agaton and Wojtek said, we cannot dismiss whatever crazy dictator is saying just because it sounds crazy. And this is actually what American politicians say all the time about Donald Trump.
Yeah.
If he says crazy things, we tend to dismiss it.
Yes.
But remember that the crazy things that dictators say that often come true. And I agree with China, that China is
I associate to another point. Of course, I don't say, you were quoting me, I didn't say that what Putin says, it's crazy. No. It's not crazy. We all know the biggest military nuclear equipment is on the Russian side. Nobody has more nuclear weapons than them. And this threat is from the very beginning. But if we are afraid of this threat, we should stop helping Ukraine on 25th February of 2022.
Right.
And if we are in it, and if we know, we all agree that we are talking about the border between East and West. If West is to stay united, democratic, free world, it must protect Ukraine. We all agree on that. If we agree on that, we must follow the steps we just started at the beginning of the war.
Małgorzata, I was just saying from the perspective of Washington and from the perspective that Ukraine was in view of many Americans, a local war.
Yes.
And no one expected they will stand up to Putin, and no one expected what happened in Washington in October, that the Ukrainian aid will be stopped.
Right.
It really had a horrible impact on the war in Ukraine and the chances. So now American administration is trying to catch up, and they do this. Secretary Blinken said that we will adjust and adapt and adjust. So this is, and from my personal opinion is that they would help Ukraine much more if they were not afraid that it will bring this.
Actually, let me press you on that, Małgorzata, if I may. How much of that strategy has been dictated by the fact that there is a US presidential election coming up in November this year, by the fact, as you say, public opinion is divided in the States about whether or not America should be helping Ukraine before helping itself,
I happen to think that if it wasn't for Joe Biden, America would not stand up behind the Ukraine with such a strong voice, because they were the strongest voice at the beginning. Remember, Europe were not so persistent like Poland and America. There were two countries, America with its power and Poland with its political arguments and our help to Ukraine. So I happen to believe if it wasn't for Joe Biden, if Trump was in office, they would not stood up to Ukraine. Especially when Trump hates Zelensky, because Zelensky stood up to him.
One point, if I may.
Just very quickly, please.
I don't think it's the question of who is the president of the United States, because geopolitics is the same for every American president, and for geopolitical reasons, they cannot let Ukraine fall. That's first thing. And second thing, what is more important for us, I'm talking right now about Europe, Western Europe. We all know this rhetoric, especially proposed by Emmanuel Macron, about European sovereignty.
Yeah.
And we have clear example how hollow is it. Europe had so many opportunities to create its European sovereignty. For instance, start helping Ukraine alone. Let them attack with European equipment Russian targets. Let's start with tanks, sending tanks to Ukraine. Nothing happened like that. Germany and France, especially Germany, they were still waiting for America to agree, and they were following America. America is the clear leader, number one, and European sovereignty, nothing more than only.
I think that there's no doubt that the European unity on this issue and also the speed at which they've moved forward has been disappointing, many would say, right? But I'd like us to move on, please, a little bit. Now, President Zelensky has actually called for a peace conference, and it's being held in Switzerland. 106 countries have agreed to attend. This is reported in Politico. But Zelensky is saying that China, and for the first time he's actually naming China, is pressuring other countries not to attend. He's threatening them with increases in fuel and agricultural prices. But what they're actually saying is, well, we don't want to attend because Russia is not being invited. So I'll start with you, Wojciech. Do they have an argument? Surely Russia should be in on the conversation, no?
Yeah. What's the point of this conference without Russia at the table, It's Russia-Ukrainian war, not like Ukrainian war with those 105 countries they invited apart from themselves or China or whatsoever. So Russia has to attend this peace conference because they are going to negotiate with Russia.
Yeah. You'd have thought that would be logical, but could it be that Zelensky is doing this simply to get more kind of political or global pressure?
Well, of course, he's doing this to isolate Russia.
To isolate Russia.
To make it feel the isolation.
Yes.
And China is very disappointing again, right? It's actually...
But, see, because Putin has done this regularly, right?
I don't agree with Wojciech that Russia should be there. Russia is completely not interested in any peace scenarios except for that we'll take Ukraine and later we can talk. If nobody agrees on that, Russia is not interested in negotiations. That is why Russia is not interested. I understand this conference, maybe you remember the very beginning of first term of Joe Biden, it was 2021. He created his idea, the summit of free world, of democratic countries.
Yeah.
It was around 100 countries taking part in it. The countries taking part in this conference is quite similar. So we see, but it's a lot of countries. I imagine that we need such summits to agree on concrete moves, what we are able to achieve, what we are not able, what are our red lines. But first thing. And second thing, these countries should find a kind of intermediator. Who will be an intermediator between Russia and Ukraine? That's for sure. We won't agree anything without a kind of peace broker.
Well, absolutely.
Turkey, will it be China? Will it be Switzerland or traditionally Norway? We'll see, but I think it's very concrete first steps of many of the peace process. Good, this process started.
Well, certainly. Turkey has offered to be a mediator in the past and so on. And Russia has said consistently that they are willing to sue for peace. But, of course, their terms are unacceptable. Unfortunately, we have to move on. But fascinating topic, and we look forward to seeing what's happening. Let's move now to the United States and Donald Trump. Now, Donald Trump has been found guilty on 34 charges, and he has promised to appeal the verdict that has made him the first US president convicted of a crime. Trump has repeated his complaints that the trial was an attempt to hobble his White House comeback bid and warned that it showed no American was safe from politically motivated prosecution. Let's have a short look at this video.
The former president is greeted with cheers and applause in the lobby of Trump Tower in Manhattan. Donald Trump vowed to keep fighting following his historic criminal conviction and called the judge presiding over his case crooked.
This is a case where if they can do this to me, they can do this to anyone. These are bad people. These are, in many cases, I believe, sick people. When you look at our country, what's happening where millions and millions of people are flowing in from all parts of the world, not just South America, from Africa, from Asia, from the Middle East, and they're coming in from jails and prisons.
Trump's comments come after he was found guilty of 34 criminal counts of falsifying documents to cover up a hush money payment to porn star Stormy Daniels to illegally influence the 2016 election outcome. In Joe Biden's first public remarks since the guilty verdict, the president said the trial proved no one is above the law.
They found Donald Trump guilty on all 34 felony counts. Now he'll be given the opportunity, as he should, to appeal that decision just like everyone else has that opportunity. That's how the American system of justice works. And it's reckless, it's dangerous, it's irresponsible for anyone to say this was rigged just because they don't like the verdict.
But has Trump's conviction hurt him? His campaign said it raised nearly $35 million in donations in the hours following his conviction, and that nearly 30% of online donors were new. After the guilty verdicts, a poll by YouGov found that 27% of Americans say Trump's conviction makes it less likely they'll vote for him. 26% say it makes them more likely to vote for him. 39% say it makes no difference. Meanwhile, the Economist tally of the latest polling averages on Saturday showed that Joe Biden is favoured by 44% of voters, while 46% of voters back Donald Trump. Whether the convictions will have a major impact on the presidential race will only be known after voters head to the polls on November the 5th.
Right, as with all things political, especially when Donald Trump is involved, Politico reminds us that Trump's campaign received $53 million while this was going on. We see the polls just there. Does that surprise you?
Oh, nothing will surprise me if it comes to Donald Trump. Absolutely nothing. No one will.
But why is
no
it
one
that
ever
so
could
many
expect
people
that we will be in this point? No one ever.
But why are so many people supporting him, and with money, not just
social
words?
media? I think that we are in the midst of the revolution of social media, and this is how it works. That we are in these bubbles, and some of American citizens are in bubble of Donald Trump and of right-wing politics, and also of the Putin's troll propaganda, and that's my. But also we are in the midst of the change in the world, so people are afraid. I don't want to dismiss everyone who supports Trump as someone who is in the bubble. So, but what I really wanted to say that when I heard the verdict guilty, I was both relieved, justice has been served, he was finally found responsible for something, because this is the problem with Donald Trump, that he was never held accountable for anything. People would go for him to jail, right? People would fight for him, but he was always able to, he is the one who said that I could shoot someone on 6th Avenue and nothing will happen. And he said it in 2016. And until now, well, actually we had two more processes, the civil processes that the trials. He was found liable in E. Jane Carroll for sexual assault, and his company was found liable. So actually this is the third trial that Donald Trump was found guilty. But this is very significant because right now American public has to struggle. Do we vote for someone who could actually be in jail? Even though it does not seem probable, but he could actually, what do we do?
Right.
How we explain to our children that, look, you can do whatever you want. You can be even found guilty by 12 jurors. You can pay hush money. You can pay hush money to porn stars, and you can still be elected president. It sounds crazy.
Let me bring Wojciech in.
You can use the biggest number of drone strikes in the history of US and then get a Nobel Peace Prize. So I guess
you're talking about Barack Obama here.
Yes. So this
6 months after he joined, after he was made
trial, for
president.
many US voters,
it's
just
demagogic.
no, but it's a fact. I mean, you can use drones. You can then use your BlackBerry to sign them off with emails that are not secure, as did Hillary Clinton, and then kill people in some rural village in Pakistan. So I guess it's all about narrative and how we look at this. For many Trump voters that are dissatisfied with democratic rule, this verdict is just part of a lawfare against him. Right. So when he says that we shall, for example, rhyming with what Biden or Obama did, supporting all of the democracies, Israel or Ukraine, Trump is saying, what they are doing to me, it's about your future. They can do it to you. They can send you somewhere at the middle of the front and whatsoever. And it's catchy narrative, It can rhyme, and he's going to sell it. And as he said just after the verdict was done, he said it's long from over. And I think what we are going to see is the same what we saw when he lost the elections. Right. It's going to escalate, and he's going to use all of the catchy phrases, it's about you, not about me, and so on.
Yeah, he's good at doing that.
It really is about him.
There is a group of people, a large group of people, that are saying, well, look, it seems to be one rule for the Republicans and especially Donald Trump and another for the Democrats. With Trump, for example, these are charges that are for things that happened 10 years ago, even before he actually started his first presidential run. Normally, these charges are not a felony. They're a misdemeanor, less serious. And that he was found guilty of all 34 charges in itself is so unusual that people are starting to say, well, I'm sorry, but this looks like a setup. Do you think Trump has a point when he says this is a setup?
Yeah, I think it's only his rhetoric. He's very good at talking to people. He created his very strong base of it's not even voters, they are his fans, and that makes him very strong in his Republican Party. That is why he is the candidate of Republican Party. But that makes him protected against such cases. People remember you mentioned these drones of Barack Obama. You called it demagogues, but for instance, Bill Clinton and his lying about Monica Lewinsky affair. Nothing happened to
but that wasn't a crime.
Nothing happened. He was impeached.
But he wasn't impeached.
He was impeached, and Hillary Clinton lost the election because of this.
He is to be impeached. We are talking about political consequences we are talking about the court case, but something completely different. I think Trump paid his political price for all these affairs around him in 2020, losing elections, and there are two different dimensions of such conflict. But I think it's not important. We are all talking about Trump, but Trump is, for me, the least important figure in that. There is a famous Chinese saying that when the finger is pointing at the moon, nobody is looking at the finger.
Right.
And we are still looking at the finger. I mean Trump, but it's not about Trump. It's about change. These high figures for Trump, they are not for Trump. Trump is just a finger in this problem.
So the anti-democratic party
people are very disappointed with Joe Biden's presidency.
Right, okay.
It's that main point. And if they want change, and it looks like they really want big change in the United States, and they have no other choice. If we are talking about two-party system, there's only left and right.
Right.
So if left is not good enough, and what we see on the southern border of the United States, that's
and many other issues
for most Americans. That is why Trump is gaining ground in the polls, and no court cases nobody takes care about it.
Let me add something.
We do need to move on. I'm sorry, but we do need to, because we do have other areas I'd like us to touch on.
Trump is not allowing us to move forward.
Trump is keeping us fixed.
Yes.
I'd like now to move on to Article 7. The European Commission says that it has closed its rule of law inquiry against Poland. The EC's so-called Article 7 procedure was initiated in 2017 over changes to the judicial system, which are enacted by the then ruling Law and Justice Party. The investigation ultimately could have led to sanctions and the loss of voting rights. We have a short video to share with all of you.
Poland's Prime Minister Donald Tusk offers European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen a warm welcome in Warsaw earlier this year, and for good reason. She brought news that Poland will gain access to up to 137 billion euros in European Union funds after the new government in Warsaw began implementing reforms it says will restore judicial independence in the country. On Wednesday, the EC decided to end its rule of law inquiry against Poland. The so-called Article 7 procedure was initiated in 2017 over changes to the judicial system enacted by the then ruling Law and Justice Party. Poland became the first country ever to be subjected to the procedure and potentially face punishment by Brussels over concerns that new rules could jeopardize the rule of law in Poland. The EC said more than 13 laws have been systematically enabled to politically interfere in the composition, powers, administration and functioning of the judiciary. But since winning the general election in October, Poland's new government has made improving relations with the EU and lifting the threat of Article 7 a policy priority. This week's announcement follows the implementation of a 9-point plan aimed at addressing the Commission's concerns by Justice Minister Adam Bodnar. In 2018, the European Parliament voted to pursue disciplinary action against Hungary under Article 7. The move followed accusations of attacks on the media, minorities and the rule of law by Hungary's right-wing government. Prime Minister Viktor Orbán denied the charges. 2 years ago, the European Commission said it would block all 22 billion euros of EU cohesion funds for Hungary until its government meets conditions related to the judiciary independence, academic freedoms and rights. But last December, the EC allowed the release of 10 billion euros in cohesion funds for Budapest. The green light came against an increasingly fraught political environment as Orbán ratcheted up his campaign against opening of accession negotiations with Ukraine, blocking a 50 billion special fund to sustain Kyiv's war-torn budget and halt further provision of military aid. In Georgia, the Commission has concerns about a new law that could be used to quash dissent and free expression. Georgia's parliament on Tuesday overcame a presidential veto of a contentious bill on foreign agents. Opposition to the law drew tens of thousands of people to the capital city, Tbilisi. Critics say it mirrors a law already passed in Russia that could be used to brand NGOs, media outlets and campaign groups as foreign agents. The law requires organisations receiving more than 20% of their funding from abroad to register as agents of foreign influence or face crippling fines. Earlier, the EU warned adoption of the bill would effectively torpedo Georgia's chances of joining the bloc, just 6 months after the country was awarded candidate status.
Right, Wojciech, I'll start with you, if I may. Now, as we saw there, and also as reported in Euractiv, Poland's Justice Minister Adam Bodnar presented to the Commission, the European Commission, an action plan, yes, a roadmap, and that resulted in the EC lifting the Article 7 restrictions. Now, if you look at Visegrad Insight, the Hungarian Minister for EU Affairs is asking the EC for a justification. He says, why has the Commission switched its approach to find sufficient the political commitments that Poland has undertaken without their effective implementation? In other words, is the plan of action sufficient for the restrictions to be lifted? What's your thought?
I mean, it's a political decision because nothing has changed when it comes to Polish law since 13th of December or 15th of October, you know. There is nothing that has changed substantially. So what the far right can say right now and is saying from Spain to Hungary, we've seen rallies in Madrid and Budapest, they are saying this is the same lawfare we've seen when it comes to Trump. You know, just the cabinet just changed and liberal elites from Brussels, not from Washington this time, are, you know, calling off their hands when it comes to our politicians, our brothers when it comes to far right and right-wing coalition in Europe. So now I think we have to think what the right-wing parties are going to do about it, because from one point of view they can radicalize just as Trump with his Project 2025, you know, decimating the deep state whatsoever. They can decimate Brussels or just, you know, create a situation when it's ungovernmentable for Brussels elites. Or they can go with Giorgia Meloni and try to work with the Commission to get some of the money, some
restrictions lifted.
Exactly, yeah. Just like Italy had with recovery plans and so on.
Right. Agaton, your thoughts on this? Is a plan of action sufficient for these restrictions to be lifted? And what do you see happening with Hungary? I mean, is that all they need to do to...
Nothing changed in the government of Hungary, but that's why there is no decision about Article 7. I think I agree with Wojciech that it was strictly politically motivated decision. But very good it happened because we don't need to think about this Article 7 scenario right now. It happened just before EU elections. I think it's the main topic here. That is why it was decision was made just now to show an example. Look, Poland is happy they are free of Article 7 because they changed the government for a liberal one, and that is why it's the example of good liberal democracy, and that's one thing. But second thing, what will happen? First thing, we see this Trumpization of right-wing parties in Europe in general. They like the way Trump communicates with voters, the simple language with empire of evil and empire of good. We are empire of good, they are empire of evil, and they love this rhetoric. Quite sufficient in Trump's example, but they cannot go as far as they would like to, because there is no ground for any exits in the European Union. I just found last week the broad poll made by a French think tank, liberal think tank, by the way, Fondapol, and the question asked to citizens of every 27 EU countries, are you in favor or against European Union? Would like to withdraw from European Union or not? Numbers are really low. It's
so people want to stay.
Average for EU, it's around, as I remember well, it's 13% people want it. No, it's below 10%. The highest number is in Greece. It's 13% of Greeks. The biggest number is in Bulgaria. Bulgaria, it's 22% of citizens of Bulgaria would like to withdraw.
Okay, fine.
And the biggest number in Greece, we all remember the problems of Greece.
Yes.
It's 11%. In Italy, in France, it's 10%. So we all see there is no possible scenario of somebody following Great Britain nowadays. So they need to negotiate with European Commission. But we will see, of course, these European elections are very important because they will shape.
I want to get Małgosia's view on the upcoming European parliamentary elections. Now, Foreign Minister Sikorski is likely to be put forward by Prime Minister Tusk for the role of commissioner.
Well, I think he has proven himself to be a great voice against Russia. The reason, he has proven to be a real leader and someone who really grasps the complexity of today's world. So I would rather see him somewhere. Well, actually, I would be sorry to see him go from being a Polish foreign minister.
Right.
So this is my thought first.
Yeah, I mean,
and I was actually even thinking in the terms of presidency, although no one wants to talk about this because Szymon Hołownia or some, we have already, the coalition decided that other people would have a chance. But I think Mr. Sikorski really proved himself to be a world-class politician.
Well, he certainly is coming across.
So outspoken, and it's so nice to hear someone to really be able to summon up what's going on and be such a strong voice for Ukraine.
Well,
I would be sorry to see him.
Sorry to see him go, and let's hope he gets the opportunity to use a louder voice. Unfortunately, I do need to move on. We've just got a few minutes left, so I want to hit the last topic before we have to end today. So we're moving now to Israel and the Gaza conflict, war. US President Joe Biden has laid out what he described as a three-phase Israeli proposal for a ceasefire in Gaza in return for the release of Israeli hostages. He said it's time for this war to end, and has crucially won a positive initial reaction from Hamas. However, two far-right Israeli ministers have threatened to collapse Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's coalition government if he agrees to the ceasefire proposal. Let's have a quick look at this video.
Wounded Palestinians evacuated by ambulance teams in Rafah on Saturday as Israeli tanks continue attacks across the southern Gaza city in defiance of an International Court of Justice order to immediately end military operations there. Israeli tanks advanced to the heart of Rafah for the first time on Tuesday, achieving control over the Philadelphia corridor that runs along the border between Gaza and Egypt. The Hamas-controlled Gaza Health Ministry said so far more than 36,000 Palestinians have been killed in Israel's war on the territory. The humanitarian situation remains dire, with the vital aid supply route via the Rafah crossing closed by Israel's combat operations. US President Joe Biden on Friday stated that Hamas is no longer capable of carrying out an attack like October the 7th, saying it was time for the war to end. Biden laid out what he described as a three-phase Israeli proposal for a ceasefire in Gaza.
It's a roadmap to an enduring ceasefire and the release of all hostages. This proposal has been transmitted by Qatar to Hamas. Today, I want to lay out its terms for the American citizens and for the world. This new proposal has three phases. The first phase would last for 6 weeks. Here's what it would include: a full and complete ceasefire, a withdrawal of Israeli forces from all populated areas of Gaza, release of a number of hostages, including women, the elderly, the wounded, in exchange for release of hundreds of Palestinian prisoners.
Significantly, the plan, promoted by Biden, has won a positive initial reaction from Hamas. But Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said on Saturday there would be no permanent ceasefire until Hamas's military was destroyed. Netanyahu is coming under increasing pressure from the families whose loved ones are being held hostage and his main political rival, Benny Gantz. He said he'd leave the war cabinet on June the 8th if it did not formulate a new plan including an international Arab and Palestinian administration to handle civilian affairs in Gaza. And two far-right Israeli cabinet members, Finance Minister Bezalel Smotrich and National Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir, have said they'll quit and collapse the government if Netanyahu agrees to the ceasefire proposal. They're against striking any deal before Hamas is destroyed. Earlier this month, the International Criminal Court prosecutor applied for arrest warrants against Netanyahu and his defense minister, Yoav Gallant, over alleged war crimes. After laying out the peace proposal, Biden repeated his rejection of the ICC's application for the arrest warrants, saying what's happening in Gaza is not genocide. As conditions worsen in the war-torn territory, thousands will be hoping for an end to the fighting and the start of a ceasefire.
OK, Margot, I'll start with you, if I may. Just very, very quickly, a synopsis of what you think. I mean, apart from the political problems that Netanyahu is facing, he's facing huge demonstrations on the streets, people demanding the release or return of the hostages and therefore accepting Biden's proposal. Your thoughts?
Oh, this was a very strong warning to Benjamin Netanyahu. That this was probably the strongest statement by American president against Israel, criticizing Israel. He said that the goals set by Netanyahu are unreal. And the time is now. He was exactly, you have to take step back. The time to end this war is now. And the time to have the day after is as soon as possible.
Right, OK.
So I really think, and Netanyahu was invited by Congress to speak in front of Congress in, we don't know yet when, but it was also a bipartisan effort.
There's a bipartisan invitation. I want to get Wojciech's...
So it was a strong warning, I would say.
It's strong warning and guidance. Now, Times of Israel, Wojciech, I mean, the last article was from Haaretz. Times of Israel reports that Prime Minister Netanyahu has been invited, as Margosha just said, to address the House in the United States, and it was a bipartisan invitation. He gets the opportunity to actually lay out the case for Israel. Your thoughts? It's very unusual.
You mean what kind of case? The genocide case of Palestinians? What I'm seeing here is a plain example of West hypocrisy. You know, we don't want to negotiate with Putin, but we are actually invading Netanyahu, who killed more than 30,000 people, civilians in Gaza, alone, you know, and those are like just confirmed numbers. We don't know how many people are under the rubble, you know. Right. Some numbers are saying it's more than 100,000
OK,
people.
let me just bring Agaton in for the last word.
I wouldn't compare Netanyahu to Putin. Putin attacked innocent country. Hamas wasn't innocent. But that's first thing. But second thing, the strongest wording, as Małgorzata just said, from Joe Biden. I think I hear strong words from him, from his part, from his side, all the time the conflict started, and he achieved completely nothing. He's painting red lines, and these red lines are still crossed. by both sides, the same scenario as we were witnessing in Syria during Barack Obama presidency. And I'm very afraid the result of these red lines will be exactly the same. Democratic president doesn't have a good idea how to cope with Middle East. We're
going to have to leave it there, unfortunately. Thank you all very much for joining us today.
This century.
Sadly, we've got sadly, I know there's a lot more to say, but unfortunately the clock has beaten us.
Too long.
Thank you very much. Well, thank you very much, and hopefully we'll all meet again and we'll have a bit more time to follow these through. And thank you all for joining us today. Have a wonderful Sunday afternoon.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.